Hello and welcome back to today's video where we'll be talking about the basic structure of the solar cells that is relevant for SCAPS simulation. My name is Emeafu and I'll be your guide. So firstly, what are solar cells? Now, solar cells are also known as photovoltaic cells. They are materials that convert sunlight or light energy into electricity through a process known as the photovoltaic effect. A combination of several solar cells make up a solar module. Typically, you will find about 72 numbers of solar cells in one solar module. Now, as you can see in the picture, on the right-hand side of this presentation, we have a solar cell here, and 72 numbers of solar cells make up one module. Now, several modules make up solar panels, and several panels connected either in series and in parallel make up a solar array. Now, typically, the reason why solar panels are connected together in series and parallel is to increase the output of the power generated. Now, let us look at the physical structure of a solar panel. That is, a solar module that has been assembled by collecting different cells together connected in series and parallel. Now, why do we put such protective covering for a solar module? The reason is to keep them away from the harsh conditions of the weather like rain, wind, snow, and also make them to last for a very long time, to as much as 25 years. So what you can see here, anodized aluminum frame, the highly transparent tempered glass, the encapsulant material, the photovoltaic cell itself, another encapsulant material, the insulating backsheet, and the junction box. All of these are targeted at protecting the solar cell itself from the harsh weather condition or harsh environmental conditions. So all of these things help to seal the solar cell in a protective laminate. Now let us look at the types of solar cells that are currently in existence. Some of the reasons or some of the criteria for differentiating these types of solar cells include the technology used, the structure of the solar cell, the application, and a host of other criteria. But for this class, we'll just focus on these few, which is the crystalline solar cell. The crystalline solar cell comprises the monocrystalline solar cell or the monocrystalline silicon solar cell and the polycrystalline silicon solar cell. We have also the thin film solar cells. In this category, you will find the amorphous silicon, the cadmium telluride, and the copper indium gallium selenide. We have organic types of solar cells. These types of solar cells are made from polymers or small organic molecules. We have the perovskite solar cell, which is based off of the perovskite structured materials. It is an emerging technology that is currently being researched by so many researchers across the globe. Now we have other types of solar cells that includes the gallium arsenide, the quantum dots, and the dye-sensitized solar cell. Now, what are the basic layers that make up the crystalline silicon solar cells? We have the front contact layer. As you can see here, the front contact layer, it is a metal grid or a transparent conductive oxide that collects the electrons that have been generated in the solar cell and make them available for the external circuits. This front contact usually allows light to pass through it with minimal shading. We have the anti-reflective coating. The anti-reflective coating is made up of materials like silicon nitride, and it helps to reduce the reflection of light from the solar cell, thereby enhancing the absorption of the cell itself. We have the N-type silicon. Here you can see the N-type silicon. We have the P-type silicon. Both the N-type and the P-type silicon make up the PN junction of the solar cell, and they act as the main light absorbing layer of this solar cell. We have the back surface field. This is the back surface field according to this crystalline structure. The function of the back surface field is to minimize recombination losses. How does it do that? It reflects back the light that wants to leave this solar cell into this part of the cell so that more light can be absorbed by the absorption layer. And the last, we have the back contact layer. The back contact layer is made up of metal sheets or films. Typically, aluminium is used, and their function is to collect the electrons that has been generated in the solar cell and make it available to the external circuits, thereby completing the electrical circuits. Now let's look at this type of solar cell, the thin film solar cell. What are the basic layers that make up the thin film solar cell? We have also the back contact layer, just as we have seen in the previous solar cell, the silicon type of solar cell. This is the back contact layer. It is a metal, and it is also used to provide the current or the electrons that has been generated to the external circuit. Typically, aluminium is used to make this type of back contact layer. We have the absorber layer. The absorber layer is made up of the P-type cadmium telluride material or copper indium gallium selenide or amorphous silicon material. The absorber layer absorbs sunlight and generates hole pairs through the photovoltaic effect. We have the buffer layer. Here you can see the buffer layer was labeled window layer. Its function is to ensure efficient junction between the absorber layer and the transparent conducting layer. So this window layer functions as a junction between the transparent conducting layer and the absorber layer, and it can be made from cadmium sulfide or zinc oxide. We have the front contact layer or the transparent conducting layer. This is typically made from indium tin oxide, fluorine doped tin oxide, aluminum doped zinc oxide. And the function is to allow light to pass through the glass substrate into the absorber layer while collecting and transporting electrons that has been generated in the absorber layer of the cell to the external circuits. Lastly, we have the substrate layer. The substrate layer, as you can see here, is either made up of glass, plastic, or metal foil. What it does is to provide mechanical support for the thin film layers. Now let's talk about the basic layers of the perovskite solar cell. As you can see, the perovskite solar cell usually has a glass substrate. It can also be a plastic substrate or any flexible material. The function of this layer is to provide mechanical support for the solar cell. We have the transparent conducting layer or transparent conducting electrode. This is the transparent conducting oxide. It is made of indium tin oxide, ITO, or fluorine doped tin oxide. Its function is to allow light to pass through from the glass to the perovskite layer, and it also conducts or transports the generated electrons to the external circuit. Now, the next one is the electron transport layer. The electron transport layer transfers electron from the perovskite absorber to the electrodes while blocking the holes. Typically, the electron transport layer is made up of tin dioxide or titanium dioxide. Alternatively, we have organic alternatives like the PCBN. The next one is the perovskite layer. The perovskite layer is the active layer or the absorber layer of this solar cell. It is made up of a perovskite structured compound that usually have the ABX structure, where A is an organic or inorganic cation, example methylammonium, formamidinium or cesium. The B is a metal cation, typically we have the lead and the tin. Then we have the X, which is the halide anion. Examples include the iodide, the bromide, and the chloride. This layer absorbs light and generates the electrons and holes pair, which are separated into free charge carriers. So the electrons that are generated here, the electron and holes that are generated here are separated into free charge carrier, while the electron goes to the electron transport layer, the hole goes to the hole transport layer. The next on the list is the hole transport layer. Like we have mentioned before, the hole transport layer, just like the electron transport layer does, facilitates the movement of the holes from the perovskite layer to the electrode while blocking the electrons. Common materials used in making the hole transport layer include the spiro-ohm-tad and PTAA, or inorganic options like the NiOX. Lastly on the list, we have the metal back electrode. The metal back electrode can be made of gold, silver, or aluminum. Its function is to collect the electrons and allow it to flow to the external circuit. So this is a typical structure and layers of the perovskite solar cell. Just like we have seen the thin film and the silicon type, we have also the organic, but in this class we will not be looking at the organic layers. Now, why have we been looking at the layers of these solar cells? The reason is because in the SCAPS simulation software, you have to impute the layers of all the solar cells that you are using. For instance, if you are working with a perovskite solar cell, you have to enter the layer, the perovskite layer, you have to enter the hole transport layer, you have to enter the electron transport layer, you have to enter the metal contact, you have to enter every other layer that is required to make it function. And that is achieved by clicking on the Set Problem button on the software. Once you click on the Set Problem button, you are presented with a window where you have to also enter the names of the layers. So in configuring the names of the layers in the software, firstly, you have to name the layer. If it is the electron transport layer or the perovskite layer, you have to give it a name. Now, you have to specify the thickness of the layer. The thickness could be in nanometers, micrometers, millimeters, centimeters, etc. The thickness specifies, this layer specifies the thickness of the layer. We have also the purity layer. This field gives you the ability to impute whether the material that is used for making up the solar cell has been doped or it is a pure material. So if it is a doped material, the number will indicate. If it is a pure material, the number that is entered will also indicate. Now, each material has a band gap. So you have to also impute the band gap of the material. So the band gap is the difference between the valence band and the conduction band, and it is measured in electron volts. We have the electron affinity also. This is another field. This is the energy required to move an electron from the conduction band to the vacuum level. So electron has to move from the conduction band to the valence band or whatever, or to the vacuum level. The electron affinity is the number that specifies how the electron is able to move. We have also the dielectric permittivity. It is the material's ability to store electrical energy in an electric field. So you have to enter all of these parameters. We have the conduction band effective density of states. This is the number of states available for electrons in the conduction band. We have also the valence band effective density of states. You can see it here. This parameter also has to be entered, similar to the conduction band effective density of states. It is the number of states available for holes in the valence band per unit volume. Next, we have the electron thermal velocity and the hole thermal velocity. This is the average velocity the electrons or holes exert due to thermal energy. It is important because it impacts the carrier mobility and diffusion rate. Next, we have the electron mobility and hole mobility. This indicates how quickly the electron or hole moves through the material when subjected to an electric field. Higher mobility results in better conductivity. Now, next here we have allow tunneling. This indicates the inertial mass of electron and hole, which affects the carrier mobility. So if you want to set this value, you have to check this box. And if you don't want to check it, then you leave this box unchecked. Last but not the least are the doping parameters. The doping parameters includes the no ND grading, the shallow uniform donor density, the no NA grading, and the shallow uniform acceptor density. In the future videos we'll be making, we'll look at these parameters in an in-depth manner and better understand what their function is and why they must be imputed in the SCAPS simulator to be able to simulate any solar cell that you want to simulate. Before I end this presentation, let me quickly go to the SCAPS software and click on the set problem. This is the interface of the SCAPS software. We will be taking a more holistic look at all the parameters making up this action panel. But for now, let's just look at the set problem. Assuming I click on the set problem here, it brings me to this window. In this window, you can now click to enter the layer. As you can see, our layer has already been entered here, the cadmium telluride, and cadmium sulfide. So if I click on add layer, it will bring me to the layer property panel. And it is on this panel that we can enter all the properties of the layer that we are trying to populate. So having said that, it brings me to the end of this video tutorial. I hope I was able to make some meaning to you in understanding the basic structures of the solar cells that are useful in SCAPS simulation. In the next video, we'll start looking at how to use the SCAPS software. Thank you.